The fluorescent lights in Hartwell Hall flickered like dying stars as Marcus Chen pushed his janitor's cart down the empty corridor. 23 years old, rail-thin, with calloused hands that spoke of manual labor rather than academic pursuits, he moved through the mathematics building with the quiet efficiency of someone invisible to the university's daytime inhabitants. Professor Whitmore's office door stood ajar, spilling yellow light into the hallway. Marcus paused, listening for movement. The building should have been empty by now. It was past midnight, and even the most dedicated graduate students had long since retreated to their apartments. But there it was, the sound of chalk scraping against blackboard, followed by a frustrated sigh. Marcus had been the night groundskeeper and janitor at Millbrook University for 3 years. He'd learned to recognize the sounds of desperation that echoed through these halls after hours. Tonight, Professor Whitmore's office held a particular brand of anguish. Through the crack in the door, Marcus could see the elderly professor hunched over his desk, surrounded by crumpled papers and empty coffee cups. The blackboard behind him was covered in equations that seemed to writhe and twist in the dim light, complex mathematical symbols that Marcus had glimpsed before but never understood. Marcus knocked softly. "Professor Whitmore, I need to empty your trash." The professor looked up, his wild gray hair disheveled, eyes bloodshot behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Oh, Marcus. Yes, of course. Come in, come in." He gestured vaguely at the overflowing wastebasket. "I'm afraid I've been rather prolific tonight." As Marcus bent to collect the discarded papers, he couldn't help but notice the equation dominating the blackboard. It was elegant in its complexity, a dance of integrals and derivatives that seemed to pull at something deep in his mind. Without thinking, he paused, his eyes tracing the mathematical symbols. "The Whitmore conjecture," the professor said, noticing Marcus's gaze. "My life's work, and my life's curse, it seems." He laughed bitterly. 15 years I've been working on this proof. 15 years of failure." Marcus continued cleaning, but his eyes kept drifting back to the equation. There was something about it, a pattern that seemed almost familiar, like a half-remembered song. As he worked, his mind began to unconsciously process the mathematical relationships, connections forming in ways he couldn't quite articulate. "What does it do?" Marcus asked quietly, surprising himself with the question. Professor Whitmore looked up, as if seeing Marcus for the first time. "It would revolutionize cryptography, change how we understand computational limits. If it could be solved, it would." He trailed off, studying Marcus's face. "You're interested in mathematics?" Marcus flushed. I just read sometimes, in the library, during my breaks." The professor nodded slowly. "Well, don't let me keep you. I should head home soon myself. This equation will still be impossible tomorrow." As Marcus finished cleaning and prepared to leave, he took one last look at the blackboard. The equation seemed to pulse with possibility, and for a moment he could almost see something. A pathway through the mathematical maze that Professor Whitmore had been wandering for 15 years. But then the moment passed, and Marcus was just a janitor again, pushing his cart down an empty hallway, leaving the professor alone with his impossible dream. Outside, the October wind rattled the windows of Hartwell Hall, and somewhere in the distance a clock tower chimed 1 o'clock. Marcus didn't know it yet, but he had less than 6 hours before his life would change forever. And less than 18 hours before someone would want him dead. Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay in his cramped studio apartment above Murphy's Deli, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a question mark. The equation from Professor Whitmore's blackboard played behind his closed eyelids like a neon sign, symbols dancing and rearranging themselves in patterns that made his pulse quicken. At 3:47 a.m. he gave up trying to rest. Marcus had always been different. While other kids played video games, he'd been fascinated by the mathematical relationships in everything around him. The spiral of sunflower seeds, the fractal patterns in tree branches, the way numbers seemed to whisper secrets about the universe's hidden architecture. But being the son of a single mother who cleaned houses, higher education had been a luxury he couldn't afford. He made coffee with shaking hands and pulled out a notebook, one of dozens he'd filled over the years with his thoughts about mathematical problems he'd glimpsed in textbooks and academic papers. Tonight felt different, though. The Whitmore conjecture had awakened something in him, a hunger that demanded to be fed. Marcus began to write. The equation dealt with prime number distribution in cryptographic systems. He'd read enough in the library to understand the basics. What Professor Whitmore was trying to prove would demonstrate that certain encrypted codes could be broken in polynomial time rather than exponential time. It would render most current encryption methods obsolete overnight. But there was an elegant solution hiding in plain sight. Marcus's pen moved faster now, his handwriting becoming increasingly erratic as ideas flowed. He approached the problem from an angle that 15 years of academic training had blinded Professor Whitmore to. Not through traditional number theory, but through a hybrid approach that combined topology with computational complexity theory. The breakthrough came at 5:23 a.m. Marcus stared at the page, his heart hammering. The solution was there, complete and beautiful, spread across 12 pages of his notebook. He'd done it. He'd actually solved the Whitmore conjecture. For a moment, he felt nothing but pure joy. Then reality crashed down around him. Who would believe that a janitor had solved one of the most challenging problems in modern mathematics? Professor Whitmore would think he'd copied it from somewhere, or that it was some kind of elaborate prank. Marcus needed to present it properly, to show his work in a way that would be taken seriously. He had 4 hours before his shift ended and the morning staff arrived. 4 hours to do something that would either change his life or destroy it. Marcus gathered his notebooks and headed back to the university. The campus was eerily quiet in the pre-dawn darkness. Marcus used his key card to enter Hartwell Hall, his footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. Professor Whitmore's office was dark now, but the blackboard still displayed the unsolved equation like a mathematical epitaph. Marcus turned on the lights and began to work. He wrote carefully, methodically, explaining each step of his solution in clear, precise language. He filled 2 additional blackboards with his proof, checking and rechecking each calculation. By the time he finished, the sun was rising, painting the mathematics building in shades of gold and amber. The solution was elegant, it was correct, and it was terrifying in its implications. Marcus stepped back, looking at what he'd accomplished. 3 blackboards covered with mathematics that would change the world. Then he heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate steps that belonged to someone who knew exactly where they were going. The door opened, and Professor Whitmore stood in the threshold, coffee cup in hand, preparing for another day of futile struggle with his impossible equation. Instead, he found his life's work solved, written in the neat handwriting of a man the academic world had never heard of. "My God," Professor Whitmore whispered, his coffee cup slipping from nerveless fingers to shatter on the floor. "What have you done?" Marcus turned to face him, suddenly aware that he'd crossed a line from which there might be no return. "I solved it, Professor. I solved your equation." Professor Whitmore's face went through a series of expressions: shock, disbelief, wonder, and finally, something that looked almost like fear. "Do you have any idea what this means?" the professor asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus nodded. "It means that most of the encryption protecting government communications, banking systems, and military networks can be broken. It means that privacy as we know it is dead." "And you just figured this out? In one night?" "I couldn't sleep," Marcus said simply. Professor Whitmore stared at the blackboards for a long moment, then looked back at Marcus with an expression that was difficult to read. "We need to talk. But not here. This office, it's not safe for a conversation like this." As they prepared to leave, Marcus noticed that Professor Whitmore's hands were shaking. Whether from excitement or fear, he couldn't tell. But as they walked down the empty corridor, Marcus caught a glimpse of someone disappearing around the corner at the far end of the hallway. Someone who had been watching them. Someone who now knew that the impossible had just become possible. The coffee shop on Elm Street was the kind of place where conversations disappeared into the hum of espresso machines and the rustle of newspapers. Professor Whitmore chose a corner table, away from the windows, his eyes constantly scanning the entrance. Marcus had never seen the elderly academic look so unsettled. "You need to understand something," Professor Whitmore said, leaning forward and lowering his voice. The Whitmore conjecture wasn't just an academic exercise. It was commissioned work. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Commissioned by whom? The Department of Defense, through a subsidiary company called Meridian Analytics. The professor's hands wrapped around his coffee cup as if seeking warmth. They wanted to know if their encryption systems were truly unbreakable. I was supposed to prove that they were. But instead, I proved they weren't. Exactly. Professor Whitmore's eyes darted toward the window. Marcus, what you've done. It's not just a mathematical breakthrough. It's a threat to national security, to global security. Marcus stared at his untouched coffee, the implications sinking in. So what do? We need to be very careful about how we handle this. The people who funded my research, they're not going to want this solution to see the light of day. And they're certainly not going to want it in the hands of someone they can't control. Before Marcus could respond, Professor Whitmore's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his face went pale. "We need to leave, now." They stood quickly, abandoning their coffee. As they headed for the exit, Marcus caught a glimpse of two men in dark suits entering the coffee shop. They moved with the fluid precision of people accustomed to violence, their eyes scanning the room methodically. Professor Whitmore grabbed Marcus's arm and steered him toward the back exit. "This way, quickly!" They slipped out through the kitchen, past startled staff, and into the alley behind the building. The professor's breathing was labored, his academic composure cracking under pressure. "My car is 2 blocks away," he gasped. "We need to get to my house. I have something there that you need to see." As they hurried through the narrow alley, Marcus heard the coffee shop's back door slam open behind them. Footsteps echoed off the brick walls, moving fast. "Run," Professor Whitmore whispered. They ran. The professor's house was a modest 2-story colonial in a quiet neighborhood near campus. He fumbled with his keys, hands shaking, while Marcus kept watch on the empty street. Once inside, Professor Whitmore immediately went to his study and began pulling books from a shelf, revealing a hidden safe. 15 years ago, when I first started working on this problem, I was naive, he said, spinning the combination dial. I thought it was pure research, but I started asking questions, and I discovered something disturbing. He opened the safe and pulled out a thick folder marked with government classification stamps. Meridian Analytics is a front company. The real client is a black operations division that most people in the intelligence community don't even know exists. They don't just want to protect American encryption. They want to ensure that no one else can break it while maintaining their own ability to crack foreign systems. Marcus flipped through the documents, his mathematical mind immediately grasping the implications. They wanted you to prove it was impossible so they could be the only ones who knew it wasn't. Exactly. And now you've handed them something they never expected, a complete solution from someone outside their control. Professor Whitmore closed the safe and replaced the books. "Marcus, I need you to understand something. These people don't just silence research. They silence researchers." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that by tomorrow morning, they're going to realize that the janitor who solved my equation is a threat that needs to be eliminated." Marcus felt the walls of the study closing in around him. There has to be another way. We could publish it, make it public knowledge. If everyone knows the solution, then global communications collapse overnight. Banking systems fail. Military networks become vulnerable. Millions of people die in the chaos. Professor Whitmore's voice was steady but grim. The solution to the Whitmore conjecture isn't just dangerous to the people who want to suppress it. It's dangerous to everyone. Marcus sank into a chair, overwhelmed. "So what do we do?" We run, and we hope we can stay ahead of them long enough to figure out a way to use this knowledge responsibly. Professor Whitmore went to his desk and pulled out a laptop, his fingers flying over the keyboard. I'm transferring everything I have about the project to an encrypted drive. If something happens to me, you'll need this information. Nothing's going to happen to you, Marcus said, but even as he spoke the words, he didn't believe them. The professor smiled sadly. Marcus, I've been living on borrowed time for months. They've been watching me, waiting to see if I'd have a breakthrough. I think they were planning to eliminate me once I either solved the problem or proved it was impossible. And why didn't they? Because they needed the solution first, and now they have it. He ejected the drive and handed it to Marcus. The difference is they expected to get it from me. They didn't expect to get it from you. Through the window, Marcus saw headlights turning into the professor's driveway. 2 black SUVs moving slowly, deliberately. They found us, Professor Whitmore said, his voice eerily calm. Go out the back. There's a path through the woods that leads to Maple Street. Take this drive and run. I'm not leaving you. Marcus, listen to me. The professor gripped his shoulders. You're the only person who truly understands the solution. If they kill both of us, they can suppress the research forever. But if you survive, you have a chance to find a way to use this knowledge to help people instead of destroying them. The front door exploded inward. Go! Professor Whitmore shouted, pushing Marcus toward the back of the house. Remember what I told you. Trust no one, and whatever you do, don't try to solve this alone. Marcus ran through the kitchen and out the back door, the encrypted drive clutched in his hand. Behind him, he heard shouting, furniture being overturned, and then a sound that made his blood freeze, a single gunshot. As he disappeared into the woods, Marcus realized that his life as an invisible janitor was over. Now he was a man with knowledge that could change the world, or destroy it, and someone very powerful wanted him dead. Marcus stumbled through the dark woods, branches tearing at his clothes, the encrypted drive burning like a coal in his pocket. Behind him, he could hear dogs barking and the heavy crunch of boots on fallen leaves. They were hunting him with military precision. He emerged onto Maple Street, gasping, his mind racing. Professor Whitmore's words echoed in his head. Trust no one. The police would be compromised. His apartment would be watched. He needed to disappear. But how do you vanish when you don't have money, connections, or experience? Marcus ducked into an all-night laundromat, using the reflection in the windows to watch the street. A black SUV cruised past slowly, its occupant scanning the sidewalks. He had maybe 5 minutes before they doubled back. Think. Professor Whitmore had said not to solve this alone. But who could he trust with knowledge that had already cost one man his life? Then he remembered Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation, despite the shared surname, a cybersecurity professor who had given guest lectures at the university. She'd been critical of government surveillance programs, vocal about digital privacy rights. If anyone might help him find a way to use this knowledge responsibly, it would be her. Marcus used the laundromat's payphone to call information, then dialed her number. It rang 4 times before a groggy voice answered. Hello? Dr. Chen? This is Marcus Chen. I work at the university. I need your help. Do you have any idea what time it is? Professor Whitmore is dead. They killed him because of something I discovered. Something that could change everything. There was a long pause. Where are you? I can't tell you over the phone, but I need somewhere safe to think. There's a 24-hour diner on Route 9 just past the interstate overpass. Mel's Place. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Marcus hung up and slipped back into the night. He stayed off the main roads, cutting through residential neighborhoods, using his knowledge of the campus area from 3 years of night shifts. Every car that passed made him jump. Every shadow could hide a killer. Mel's Place was a chrome and neon relic from the 1950s, populated by truckers and insomniacs. Dr. Chen was already there when Marcus arrived, sitting in a corner booth with 2 cups of coffee. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe early 30s, with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and black hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. "You look like hell," she said as he slid into the seat across from her. "I feel worse." Marcus pulled out the encrypted drive. "Professor Whitmore gave me this before they killed him. He said you might be able to help." Dr. Chen's expression grew serious. "Marcus, I need you to start from the beginning. What exactly did you discover?" Marcus told her everything: the equation, the solution, the revelation about meridian analytics, the chase through the woods. As he spoke, he watched her face grow progressively more alarmed. "Jesus," she whispered when he finished. "You solved the Whitmore conjecture? In one night?" "I know how it sounds. It sounds like you're either a mathematical genius or completely insane." She studied his face. "Given that someone apparently killed Professor Whitmore over this, I'm leaning toward genius." Dr. Chen plugged the drive into her laptop and began scrolling through the files. Her fingers flew over the keyboard, accessing encrypted documents and classified reports. After 20 minutes, she leaned back, her face pale. "This is worse than I thought," she said. "Meridian Analytics isn't just a front company. They're connected to something called Project Blackwood, a program designed to maintain American cryptographic superiority by ensuring that breakthrough discoveries remain classified indefinitely." "What does that mean?" "It means they don't just suppress research. They eliminate researchers who can't be controlled." She pointed to a document on her screen. "Look at this. In the past 5 years, 12 mathematicians and computer scientists working on encryption-related problems have died in accidents or suicides. All of them were close to breakthroughs that could have compromised existing systems." Marcus felt sick. "So they're going to kill me. Unless we can find a way to make your knowledge too dangerous to suppress." Dr. Chen's fingers drummed on the table. "Marcus, I need to see your solution. If it's really as complete as you say, there might be a way to use it as insurance." Marcus pulled out his notebook and showed her the 12 pages of mathematical proof. Dr. Chen studied each page carefully, her expression growing increasingly amazed. This is brilliant," she breathed. "You approached the problem from an angle that no one else considered. But Marcus, do you understand what this means? With this solution, anyone could break virtually any encryption in use today. Banking systems, military communications, personal privacy, all of it becomes vulnerable. Professor Whitmore said the same thing. That's why we can't just publish it. But we can't let them bury it either." Dr. Chen closed the notebook and looked at him intently. "There's a third option. We could create a dead man's switch." "What's that?" "We encrypt your solution using a quantum-resistant algorithm and distribute copies to journalists, scientists, and government officials around the world. Then we create a system that will automatically release the decryption key if anything happens to you." Marcus considered this. "So they can't kill me without making the very information they want to suppress go public?" "Exactly. But Marcus, there's a catch. Once we set this up, there's no going back. You'll be in hiding for the rest of your life, and you'll have enemies in the highest levels of government." Before Marcus could respond, Dr. Chen's laptop chimed with an alert. She frowned at the screen, then her face went white. "They found us," she said, snapping the laptop shut. "My phone's been tracked. There are 3 SUVs converging on this location." Through the diner's windows, Marcus could see headlights approaching from multiple directions. The few other customers seemed oblivious to the danger, but the waitress behind the counter was watching the approaching vehicles with the careful attention of someone who'd seen trouble before. "Back exit," the waitress called out, not looking at them directly. "Through the kitchen, 3 minutes, maybe less." Dr. Chen grabbed her laptop and the encrypted drive. "Marcus, I need you to trust me. I know a place where we can set up the dead man's switch. But we have to move now." As they headed for the kitchen, Marcus heard the diner's front door chime. Heavy footsteps, professional voices asking questions. They slipped out through the kitchen's back door and into Dr. Chen's car, a nondescript Honda that she'd clearly chosen for its ability to blend in. As they drove away, Marcus saw armed figures surrounding the diner. "Where are we going?" he asked. "To see someone who used to work for the people hunting you," Dr. Chen replied. "Someone who knows how they think and how to stay ahead of them. Can we trust him?" Dr. Chen's smile was grim. "He's my brother, and he's been waiting 15 years for a chance to bring down Project Blackwood." As they drove through the pre-dawn darkness, Marcus realized that his simple life as a university janitor was truly over. Now he was a pawn in a game where the stakes were global security, and the only way to survive was to play better than the people who wanted him dead. But first, he had to stay alive long enough to learn the rules. The safe house was a converted warehouse in the industrial district, its windows painted black, and its entrance hidden behind a legitimate-looking auto repair shop. Dr. Chen's brother, David, was nothing like Marcus had expected. Instead of the typical government operative stereotype, he was a soft-spoken man in his 40s with graying temples and the careful movements of someone who'd learned to be perpetually alert. "You're the janitor who solved the Whitmore conjecture," David said, not making it a question. "I've been monitoring Project Blackwood communications all night. They're in full crisis mode." "How do you know about—" "I used to work for them." David's voice carried the weight of old regrets. 15 years ago, I was a cryptographer for the NSA. I helped design some of the systems your equation just made obsolete. When I started asking questions about how the research was being used, I learned about Project Blackwood the hard way." He rolled up his sleeve, revealing a scar that ran from his wrist to his elbow. "They tried to kill me too. Made it look like a suicide attempt. I've been underground ever since, gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment to expose them." Sarah pulled out her laptop and connected it to a sophisticated array of computers and servers. "David's been building a network of secure communications, completely isolated from government surveillance. If we're going to implement the dead man's switch, this is our best chance." Marcus watched them work, feeling simultaneously amazed and terrified. "What exactly are we doing?" "We're creating digital insurance," David explained. "Your solution will be encrypted and distributed to a network of journalists, scientists, and international organizations. The decryption key will be split into fragments and held by different parties. If anything happens to you, if you don't check in every 48 hours, the key fragments will be automatically released." "But there's something else," Sarah added, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "We're not just protecting your solution. We're using it to expose Project Blackwood itself." She turned the laptop screen toward Marcus. It showed a complex program that was automatically analyzing the government documents from Professor Whitmore's encrypted drive. "Your mathematical approach doesn't just solve the Whitmore conjecture," she explained. "It can be applied to break the encryption that Project Blackwood has been using to hide their communications. We can expose their entire operation." Marcus stared at the screen as classified documents began appearing. Kill orders, cover-up operations, lists of eliminated researchers. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. "How long do we have?" Marcus asked. "Not long," David replied, monitoring multiple screens showing traffic cameras and communication intercepts. "They've traced Sarah's car. They know you're in this area. We have maybe an hour before they start searching every building systematically." Sarah's program chimed with completion. "Done. The dead man's switch is active, and I've used your solution to decrypt enough Project Blackwood documents to bring down the entire operation. Now we just need to—" Alarms suddenly blared throughout the warehouse. David's face went grim as he watched his security monitors. "They found us. Multiple teams. Full assault configuration. They're not planning to take prisoners." Marcus felt a strange calm descend over him. After a night of running and hiding, he was almost relieved that the chase was ending. "What do we do?" "You're going to walk out of here," David said, pulling on a bulletproof vest. "Sarah and I will buy you time. I'm not leaving you." "Marcus, listen to me." Sarah grabbed his shoulders. "You're not just a janitor anymore. You're the key to changing how the world thinks about privacy, security, and the power of information. If you die here, nothing changes. If you live, you can make sure that no one else dies for asking the wrong questions. David handed Marcus a small device. This is a secure communicator. In 24 hours, you'll receive instructions for a safe meeting point. There are people around the world who have been waiting for someone like you, someone with the knowledge and courage to stand up to organizations like Project Blackwood. The sound of approaching vehicles grew louder. David and Sarah moved to defensive positions, their faces set with the determination of people who had found something worth dying for. "The back exit leads to the storm drains," David called out. "Follow them east for 2 miles. You'll come up near the train station." Marcus hesitated at the exit. What about the equation? What if someone else misuses it? Sarah smiled, even as she checked her weapon. "That's why we built safeguards into the dead man's switch. The full solution will only be released if something happens to you. Otherwise, it stays encrypted until the world is ready for it. And when will that be? When people like you are in charge of how it's used instead of people like them." The warehouse doors exploded inward. Marcus heard gunfire as he dropped into the storm drain system, the encrypted drive still clutched in his hand. Above him, the battle for the future of digital privacy was being fought by 2 people who barely knew him, but believed in what he represented. He ran through the tunnels, guided by emergency lighting and the sound of rushing water. Behind him, the gunfire stopped. He didn't know if that was good or bad. 24 hours later, Marcus stood in a small cafe in Montreal, clean-shaven and wearing new clothes provided by David's network. The secure communicator buzzed with an incoming message. "Sarah made it out," the message read. "David didn't, but the dead man's switch worked. Project Blackwood is being exposed by journalists in 12 countries simultaneously. You did it." Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the weight of Professor Whitmore's death and David's sacrifice. When he opened them, a young woman with a press badge was sitting across from him. "Mr. Chen, I'm Rebecca Martinez from the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. We've been expecting you." "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "Now we change the world," she replied. "Your solution doesn't just break encryption, it shows us how to build better systems that protect people instead of controlling them. But it's going to take time, and it's going to take people who understand both the mathematics and the human cost of getting it wrong." Marcus looked out the cafe window at the busy Montreal street. Somewhere out there, governments were scrambling to understand the implications of his discovery. Somewhere else, other mathematicians were working on problems that could change the world. And somewhere, other organizations like Project Blackwood were deciding who lived and who died based on what they knew. "I used to be invisible," Marcus said quietly. "A janitor who nobody noticed." "You're not invisible anymore," Rebecca replied. "The question is, what are you going to do with that visibility?" Marcus thought about Professor Whitmore, dying to protect dangerous knowledge. About David, sacrificing his life to expose the truth. About Sarah, fighting to ensure that brilliant discoveries served humanity instead of enslaving it. "I'm going to make sure that no one else dies for solving the wrong equation," he said. Rebecca smiled. "Then let's get to work. The world needs mathematicians who understand that numbers have consequences, and consequences have victims." As they walked out of the cafe together, Marcus realized that his journey from invisible janitor to reluctant hero was just beginning. The equation was solved, but the real work, building a world where knowledge served justice instead of power, was just starting. And for the first time since he'd stared at that blackboard in Professor Whitmore's office, Marcus Chen was ready for the challenge. The end.